Hi George, good to see you. Hope you're keeping well.
Likewise.
Yeah, thank you very much. George, obviously new team, new era for you. A lot has been made of your teammate over the winter, of course, whether given his silence after Abu Dhabi, what might happen. He says he's come back a different driver this season. He's going to be much better than he was even at the end of last season. Toto says he's going to be more aggressive this season. What kind of Lewis Hamilton have you discovered in the short period you've spent around him over these past few days or weeks?
Obviously, my working relationship with Lewis over the past 3 years hasn't been as close as it probably was 4 and 5 years ago when I was the junior driver and seeing him work week in, week out. But it always amazes me how somebody so talented and successful as Lewis continues to strive for more, and I think that is incredibly inspiring and motivational for me as a young driver to try and reach the heights that Lewis has achieved. And what an opportunity for me to be his teammate, to learn from him and see how he goes about his business. So I think we're going to have a really good relationship between the two of us, and we can really work well together to push the team forward.
Great, thank you, Ian. Lawrence Edmondson next, please.
Hi George, I understand you've been out in the car this morning. How was it? I know it's quite windy over there, and could you sense the kind of difference you're going to get this year with these cars compared to the previous generation?
Yeah, well, I'm not too sure how many of you are in the UK at the moment, or if you can actually hear the wind through the windows at the moment. But it's the wind. I'd say it's the windiest day I've ever experienced in my whole motorsport career. It was absolutely crazy, but we managed to keep the car on the black surf. And to be honest, we just went through the program of just running it, making sure I'm comfortable, which I am, and I'm pleased about. The car handled, I'd say, largely as we expected, but equally with these conditions in the wet and with the wind, there's not a huge amount you can take from it. So far we're in a good place. I think we're in a good window ahead of Barcelona.
Thank you. Scott, next, please.
Thanks, Rosa. Hi, George. We know that you're no stranger to Mercedes. We've seen you in Mercedes gear and driving Mercedes cars before, but has it been a bit of a different process knowing it's going to be your car for the entire season? How's it been sort of getting into the team with that in mind, rather than stepping in for a test, or like when you did that one-off weekend at Sakir?
I'd say it's been as I'd expect from a World Championship winning outfit, that they are absolutely on top of every single detail, and it's so impressive to see. And I guess I almost maybe took it for granted when I was a Formula 3 driver and a Mercedes F1 simulator driver and travelling around and seeing how they operate. But it's so impressive, from the simplest of things to the most technical things of the whole operation. But I really do feel like I'm at home. Everybody's been so welcoming. I know the team so well, so I already feel comfortable with them. I think they feel comfortable with me. And as I said before, we can just get to business. And I think that's been best for all. And it doesn't even feel like a transition period. It just feels like I am with a team who I've been with over these past years. And it was only recently I realised that I've actually driven a Mercedes F1 car every single year since 2017. So I do really feel immersed with these guys.
Thanks so much. Andrew Branson next, please.
Thanks, Rosa. Hi, George. Obviously, you've had a winter, been able to embed yourself in a factory you were already kind of embedded in, whereas Lewis has had to deal with a whole load of issues that we all know well about. Have you ever considered whether that might be an opportunity for you? That he might not necessarily be going into this season as well prepared as he might have done in the past, or anything like that?
No, I think Lewis is a fighter, he's a racer, and his absolute main priority is to be the best version of himself when he hits the track in Bahrain for race one. He's far more experienced than I am. He knows what it takes to be a world champion, and he knows what preparation he needs over the course of a pre-season to prepare himself best for that first race. So everybody's different. I'll have a different approach probably to Lewis. He has a different approach to another driver, and that's between all of the Formula One drivers. And you need to learn what is best for you and respect how each individual does that.
Great, thank you. Christian, number 4 next, please.
Thanks, Rosa. George, you've had this impressive debut in Bahrain alongside Valtteri, where you immediately challenged for victory. Do you think deep inside yourself that there's a chance you can match Lewis from race 1?
It's something I've not even thought about, to be honest, because my main goal is to make sure that I have the team and the car around me for and developing the car in the correct direction to give us the best opportunity over the course of the next 2, 3, 4 years, because we've seen the development rate. We hear rumours from all the other teams of how much they're developing, and you've got to remember that Formula One developed this rule set with the idea that they were going to be around 4 seconds slower, and we're already hearing from every single team that they're far, far faster than that. So Lewis and I need to work together. We can't focus too much on each other because things are constantly changing, and that's where we need to take a step back. We hope Mercedes will still be the fastest team and fastest car on the grid, but there's no guarantees, and we need to not be naive to that and work together to ensure that we are.
Thank you, Christian. Jerome, next, please.
Yeah, hi, George. Lewis was just speaking about the support he gave to Nicholas Latifi, and how sad and worrying it is that the amount of online abuse he received and the damage to his mental health, and that more should be done by social network companies to tackle this. Is this something that's close to your heart and that you agree with?
I absolutely agree with it. I think more needs to be done for athletes, for people in the spotlight, because people behind the computer, behind the keyboard, think they have a right to say what they like to somebody who is out there trying to make a career for themselves. And it's almost forgotten that everybody is human. I want to do as much as I can. Equally, I know that I am a young racing driver, and I still need to learn and educate myself more about this. But something really does need to be done, and I felt really, really bad for Nicholas. He's such an amazing guy. He's put so much hard work and effort in. He's progressed a huge amount. Mistakes happen. I know firsthand how difficult that specific Williams car was to drive. He didn't deserve at all to get what he received. So, yeah, definitely more needs to be done.
Thank you. Adam Cooper, next, please.
Hi there. Can I ask you, wearing your GPDA hat, what are your thoughts on the changes the FIA announced yesterday to race direction and things like the remote race control and the clampdown on radio traffic? And did you have any input as the GPDA? Did you talk to the FIA during the winter?
Yeah, we with the GPDA we did speak with the FIA, but to be fair to them, they were incredibly proactive straight away after Abu Dhabi to find better solutions. I think the VAR solution is great, and it makes total sense to have further assistance, people analysing live, and more input to get a quicker view and decision to be made. Times progress, things move on. The way that drivers are exploiting the rule book is understandable, and equally the FIA need to do more to compensate that, because every team, every driver is always going to look for a way to get the upper hand. So I think it will take some time to really refine, but I think it's definitely a step in the right direction, but it's never enough. It's always going to need more, and I think the VAR and the more things we can do virtually can only be beneficial.
Thanks so much, Adam. Next up, Luke Smith, please.
Thanks, Rosa. George, completing the shakedown today, I know it's only a handful of laps you're able to complete, but in terms of getting for a feel for the car and how it compared to the simulator, I mean, Lewis said that on the sim it felt like something completely different to anything he'd ever driven before. How did it actually feel when you were driving it on track? Were there any big surprises at all?
Well, firstly, I think this morning it gave me goosebumps when the car was fired up for the first time. I've driven it so often, so many laps in the simulator. I've seen so many drawings of it. I've had so many meetings about it, but there's nothing like going to a racetrack. It almost brings me back to my roots. A cold, wet, windy day at Silverstone. But here with Mercedes Formula One team, I think the facts are if you take the exact same car when there's no wind and then you put it in, I think it's 100 km/h winds today, it's going to feel very difficult to drive. It certainly wasn't easy out there with the conditions, but it was very much in line with what we saw at the simulator. And I'll be going back correlating this afternoon, and but it's going to be a constant learning process. I think we're all going to take today with a pinch of salt and just get through the program, make sure the car runs okay, make sure the drivers are comfortable, and make sure we're in the best spot possible ahead of Barcelona.
Thank you, Lou. Christian Männer, bitte.
Hi, George. Lou said earlier that he just hopes that your driving styles are not that dissimilar. You probably had a closer look into his style the previous years than the other way around. What can you tell us about your driving styles? Are they very different or pretty similar?
I think they're pretty similar. Time will tell, and it is a question when asked, what is my driving style? I answer truly when I say I don't really know, because I want to be adaptable to the situation. I wouldn't say I'm especially smooth, but equally I wouldn't say I'm very aggressive either. And I think from what I've seen, I do think we have a similar way of driving there, where we always try and find the limit of the tyre, but not often trying to go over the limit, and pretty smooth in our general approach. And as I said, time will tell, but I think we'll be in a very similar boat, and I have no doubts that we'll be working well together.
Thank you. Alex?
Thanks, Rosa. Hi, George. Another question about something Lewis said earlier. He said he wants you to learn as much as you can and grow as much as you can in Mercedes. I just wondered, has he said anything to you about how that might happen? Does he mean he's going to help you directly with that? Do you know? Thanks.
Lewis and I have a huge amount of respect for each other. I think it has also helped that I was in the engineering meetings 5 years ago, sat at the back, listening and learning, and that working relationship was already there, and I guess we always knew over time that this was a big possibility that we could be teammates. So we've always had a good relationship in terms of how he will help develop me. I think just being open with one another. I think we need to prioritise the pace of the car before prioritising each other, because as I said, things aren't going to be quite as clear cut as they were in the past 3 years when the regulations have been stable. Things have tailed off and there's only small improvements coming here and there. The rate of improvement is going to be massive this year, and we need to make sure we're sharing as much data as possible between each other, working as well as possible with each other, because it's in our own interest to make sure we have the fastest car. And when if that time comes, then we can potentially worry about each other. But until then, it's full focus on making the fastest car possible for each other.
Right, thank you. Ted, please.
Thanks, Rosa. Hi, George. So bearing in mind what you just said there, George, do you recognise that if you drive for Mercedes, certainly in this era, then you will be challenging for the championship? And have you got your head fully around that?
It's something I'm not even thinking about and taking into consideration. People have asked me, what are you going to do differently this year now you're fighting for a championship? The answer is nothing, because the process and the routine I've had up until this point is what has led me to getting this drive in the first place. So I'm going to sleep the same, I'm going to eat the same, I'm going to train the same, because I feel like I was doing my absolute maximum, my best, to give you the best possible shot at the Mercedes seat in the first place. If I feel like I could be doing more this year, I would have been doing it anyway. So I think it's important not to overanalyze it, not to change too much when I feel like I've got a system that's been working for me. It may be very different to someone else, but for me, I feel like it's working, and I want to continue what I've built on over the past 4 or 5 years.
Thank you. So Duncan?
After the Abu Dhabi race, you tweeted saying that the result was completely unacceptable. Just this week, given that the changes that the FIA have made, Mazzy being stood down, etc., made a mistake. Do you think that Lewis should be given an apology or owed an apology by the FIA?
I think in sport, there is always a huge amount of pressure on every individual, whether that's from the athlete, from the coach, from the manager, from the engineers, to the referees or the race directors. I think we've all come to the agreement that what's happened in Abu Dhabi was incorrect. The changes have been made because of the outcome of Abu Dhabi, but this is a question for Lewis to answer. I think he also recognises that. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say from that. Mistakes happen when the heat of the moment is on and people's emotions are high. Fingers crossed, the changes the FIA have made, that won't happen again. But I do really feel for Lewis, because how he bounced back at the end of that season. He had that race completely under control, and he only had to bring it home, and he'd have been an 8-time world champion, and he had that completely taken away from him.
Thank you. Jan, next, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. George, first of all, congratulations on your promotion to the Mercedes Works team. Back in 2020, you had small problems fitting in the Mercedes W11. Did Mercedes have to make certain compromises, however small, to fit?
I think there was actually a regulation change this year as well, that there was a minimum volume for the cockpit size to get around this issue. Whether they were compromises or not, I think because they knew fairly early on that I would be driving, the foundation of the car was with a bigger chassis, so you learn to adapt and get around it. Obviously, the smaller chassis you have, naturally the faster you will be, but to my understanding, we are at the limit of the regulation, as every other team is in that department, and I fit in great, but previously was certainly not so easy, but so far so good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rita, you next up.
Thank you. Hi, George. My question is, what would you say to that 16-year-old boy who decided to send an email to Toto Wolff? And how do you describe yourself as a driver now when compared to the driver Williams got a few years ago?
Well, I'd say to a younger version of myself is just follow your gut. That was my gut was telling me to send Toto an email or do things as I did, and not as a kid. There's a lot of nerves to do something like this, and I'm not too sure why, because at the end of the day, the worst that could have happened is I got no response. So can you guys hear that? The wind, by the way, I don't know if you can hear that or not, but it's pretty crazy. And I mean, as a driver compared to the one that Williams got 3 years ago, I'm far more complete. I'm far from the end product. I'd say raw speed never changes, but you learn how to get more out of your equipment and the team around you. And I think that's where I've learned a lot, and how I've progressed. It's not because I've learned to be faster, it's because I've learned how to deal with more scenarios. This just comes with experience, really.
Great, thank you. Last question, Patrick, please.
Yes, thanks, Rosa. George, how important is it to have a quick start with these new regulations and so on? Is it an advantage or disadvantage for you to... Oh, my camera? Yeah, I have my camera on, it says.
I can hear you.
Okay, thanks. Is it an advantage or disadvantage to switch teams with this big regulation swap?
I think there's absolutely no importance to have a quick start to the season, because it's ultimately you win a championship over the course of 23 races, and you've only got to look back last year at Mercedes and Lewis. You know, Max and Red Bull were far superior to them. They were so much faster, and everybody thought they would just absolutely run away with the championship. Yet Mercedes managed to turn it around and fight back. And by the end of the season, they had the faster package. And if you take an average over the course of the year, it was pretty similar. I still think Red Bull had the upper hand. But as I said, this year is going to be exaggerated even more, because the development is going to be massive. We've got to learn about these 18-inch tyres. We've got to learn about this new ground effects car, how the two interact with each other. I'm sure there's going to be a few interesting philosophies when we arrive in Bahrain for the first race. But you've got to look further into the distance, because things are going to change so fast. And then finally, with your other question, I don't think it's a negative at all to be changing it. I think it's you always like to keep a bit of consistency across years, but this, I would say, is the best year possible to change teams, because everything is starting from scratch. You're starting from scratch as a driver. Your working relationship with the team. Things are starting from zero. So, I wanted to get in that Mercedes seat as soon as possible, but looking back, I think this was the perfect time.
Thanks, George. Thanks, Rosa.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, George. Thank you
very much, everybody.
Have a nice day.
See you in Barcelona. Cheers.
Thank you.